Good evening, Martha.
I'm so glad that you people weathered the weather and you got here safely. And I want to say how glad I am that Elvis got to sing tonight. That was really cool. And you know, he's talking about going to the other side like I am. I'm on the other side, but I love to come back and visit. You know that. So, welcome this evening.
Thank you.
And I just want you to know that when you do go on the other side, we're just all one in this side and that side. So it's not like we're not meeting anyone better or different than who we are. We're just all on the same plane. So you're all sons of God. And that's the beautiful message today in spirituality, is that no one is a higher rank, or there's no gurus, let's put it that way. So anyway, I'm just blabbling too much. I'm going to get out of here.
Martha?
Yes?
I have a question. Vivian's not feeling all that well this evening. Can you arrange it such that if she needs to get up to go to the bathroom, that it would be all right?
Oh, I'm sorry to hear such things.
I'm okay, actually. I'm just a little worried that I don't want to disturb anything.
Well, if you have to leave, can you just say that this is time for you to go and you're going to be gone? You know, you're welcome to come back in, too. So just say you have to leave for a minute, okay?
Okay,
just let us know that you're leaving, and then we can do what we need to.
Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for preparing us. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am John the Divine, and I am glad to be here this evening and to meet with you, Nancy. I remember you. I saw you Saturday. You're a great fan, and I want to let you know I appreciate that. And I'd like to say hello to Vivian, who hasn't been here for a long time.
Hello.
Yeah, glad to have you here, and hope that we have a real good evening with everybody. And Mac, I know you're here too, holding up the fort for us.
Yes, I'm here, thank you.
Okay, well, we need that fort held up, so do a good job. And tonight, I know some people have some questions, and so maybe that's a good place to start. So would someone with their questions want to go ahead with that?
I have a question.
All right.
At our healing circle on Thursday, this past Thursday, I was asking Karen if she realized who she was talking to, and she said she didn't have any idea. So I told her she was talking to John the Divine, who had walked this earth with Master Jesus, and that you were his disciple. I hope I was correct on that.
Oh, you are definitely correct. Yes, I was one of the disciples, and I was very fortunate and one of those that Jesus selected because he felt we would make good fishers of men. And that was a very honoring thing for me to be able to join him and the others. And we did our best to share the message whenever we could.
Thank you for doing so.
It was my honor and my privilege. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, I do have a question.
Well, very well.
What could help me better to grow spiritually?
Well, that's a very good question. There are several things people can do to grow spiritually. And this question applies to everybody, Nancy. I think that you're just one of many people searching, and to get that answer is not always simple, because everybody's personality and their spiritual development will take them where they need to be. However, a very, very good place to start is meditating every day. Do you meditate?
I should.
Well, that is your connection to a higher consciousness, and your higher self, which we call God. And in doing that, you tune into the bigger picture of don't be still and know that I am God, you are God. And in doing that, you start to receive, over time, some people have longer time than others in learning to dispel the voices in their head and just move right into their heart. But when that practice of sitting and finally develops to the point where you're receptive and open, you start receiving different information of different things that are pertinent to you, and sometimes of great value. So it's a guidance system, you might say. And with that guidance system, a lot of answers can be given to you that you need to trust and then act upon. It's not always easy to do. Sometimes the guidance comes through and you'll say, oh, that's not what I wanted for an answer, and you might want to disregard it. And sometimes it might be a very scary answer. Sometimes the answers are wonderful answers, and you can say, oh, I thought that's the way it was, and now I know. And you can trust that information. So whatever the information is, it's always for your highest, truest, and best, and not necessarily the way you think it will come as far as what you're used to. May I just give you an example that when Marilyn was abandoned on the Oregon coast many years ago, when she went to the beach to meditate, because there she was with her husband, drove home angry in the car, and she was stranded, and it was a very upsetting situation. So she went for some guidance of what to do. And sitting on the beach, I'll shorten the story for you, but she asked for God to give her a message and make it a great big billboard like in Times Square in neon lights, so she knew it was from God, and she was, that way she would know that's the message she's supposed to pay attention to. And when the message finally came through to her, and she said, oh no, she says, that can't possibly be. And so she said, let's just erase that, and I want the right message. And so the same message appeared again. Oh no, she said to God. She told God that he didn't understand. That wasn't the right message. So she tried to erase the message and try again. And on the third time, she said, obviously this is the message. It took her 3 times. And it was not at all what she wanted to hear. But it told her to ask for a temporary separation from her husband when she returned home. She was so codependent. That was the last thing of all the hundreds of things that she had thought would come through. That was the absolute last one of what she wanted to do, to stand up and speak up and be assertive and ask for something that would help her leave the situation of domestic violence. Was not at all what she had wanted to hear. But in praying for the next 24 hours, by the time she got off the airplane in Seattle, she had enough gumption and enough courage through all her prayers to actually ask for the temporary separation. And that was the beginning of her leaving that situation, which if she'd stayed today, she would be dead by now. So you see that sometimes the information might sound not like we really want it to, but in the long run it was actually a blessing, because no one had ever suggested she even ask for a separation. And it had to come from God. It had to come from her higher self to tell her to get out of there while she was still doing as well as she was, and that eventually the pieces fell together so she could completely leave. So, meditation can save your life. In this case, it did. And in researching for other opportunities to grow spiritually, she already was in 12-step programs, which is very, very spiritual. There's the 11th step is to ask for more conscious guidance from a higher power. And the conscious guidance is to be on a daily basis. So she, because of needing to follow the steps and also having information from the beach that day, knew how valuable it could really be for her. And then she looked for a meditation group, and for a year went with a group of ladies that took turns leading a meditation for them every week, and they would discuss afterwards what happened. That group turned out to have a change of attitude as someone came in and started to be the controlling, manipulative person, and so she prayed for God to send her to another group that meditated that would be a better place for her, and that's how she found the Edgar Casey Search for God groups. we brought her to connect with a person that was in the Search for God group and could tell her where the meetings were. And so she did that for many, many years along with her other spiritual growing. And then she found there's special books were showing up in her life that were very special books. The Ascended Masters were putting books in her hands about Ascended Masters. Isn't that interesting? And she started reading those books and getting more enlightened about what was going on beyond the Edgar Casey situation. So that was on another level, you might say, of growth. And then she's discovered that going to spiritual book studies that were channeled were very helpful, because in that environment it's a very growing experience. And she's now chairing or has people come to her house through a study group of Ascended Masters on Thursday nights. And in the discussion of reading these books, such a spiritual growth can occur. You see, spirituality is all about energy expanding. And as the people discuss the principles in the books about energy, then you, in discussing them, actually change your pitch or vibration as you're in the group discussing it with the others. You're hearing their understanding, you're providing your understanding, and it allows you to grow on an energy level, on an emotional level. So anything you can participate in is really the answer. Where there is application of spiritual principles, where you actually put it into your life and practice it on a daily basis, and maybe take an inventory at night and say, well, how did I do today? Was I kind to this person, or do I need to make an amends to somebody that maybe I was foolishly interrupted somebody, or using the golden rule maybe as a guide of how you treated somebody today, then you kind of feel sheepish that that's what happened, and or you feel very pleased that you were able to move forward and do something you didn't do before, and how well it worked out, and give yourself a pat on the back. So it's in the applying of the information spiritual growth happens. It's not just reading the books. It's actually participating in groups that are trying to put these practices into all their lives, not just the meditation, but they're applying it when they're out with other people, or in their own thinking, to stay focused on God rather than those voices in their head that sometimes are having quite a heyday. So it's a matter of constantly learning to stay on track with God's focus in your life, and not allowing the ego to come in and take you off that path. However, as human beings, you do go off the path, because that's the lesson you probably needed to change and move back onto the path, which actually healed your soul. So when people say, you know, I'm going backwards, or it feels uncomfortable, or I really did a bang-up job of making a fool of myself, those particular situations are your growing situations, and all you have to do is to send love to the other person involved, and we're talking more about that later this evening, but to do what's necessary to make amends in situations. That's how you heal your soul. Those are the lessons we have come here to learn, and how to handle that, which we're going to talk more about tonight. So the spiritual path is one that encompasses a lifestyle of what is the most loving thing for you and for the other person. And if you can manage that on a consistent basis, you have come a very far way. And we will talk about how far you have come shortly. But maybe those some ideas that spiritual reading, another thing that's very helpful is if you read a spiritual book before you go to sleep at night. That is a wonderful way to set yourself up for spiritually experiencing in the other side after you have gone to sleep. Marilyn spent nights and years of reading the Course in Miracles every night before going to bed at night, because it is a very wonderful book of truth and love. And so whatever fits your need what you're learning and growing through to read at night before you go to bed, or to start your morning with prayers, that God can lead you through the day to do His wishes, and yet you are just His representative that day in others' lives. Those things are all practices that will help you to move into the higher consciousness of God. Eventually, the more light you put in your life by doing that, the less ego has a chance to get in the way. And I'll just give you a nice little hint to how to do it in a very easy way. You might every morning invite the Holy Spirit to be in charge of the next 24 hours in your life, and that way the ego doesn't have a chance. So it really turns your life upside down into walking and being a channel of God. And as that becomes more and more of who you are, your oneness with God will become more approachable. You will move into that fifth dimension that we're all moving into now, but you will have less cobwebs. We had Halloween last night. You'll have less cobwebs to display or get rid of the more the Holy Spirit is involved. So I don't know how much other books you've read that are spiritual, but they're usually very helpful. But I would suggest an actual study group to help implement it and actually make it come alive for you.
Nick?
You're welcome. Vivian, did you have some questions?
I had the same question that Nancy posed to you, and so I was listening to everything. But I guess I was hoping for a more specific answer rather than a general answer. I'm wondering if I'm wandering aimlessly or if I'm actually making progress. I feel right now very low, like I'm not making progress, and I pray and try and meditate every day, and I feel like I feel God then, but I
Are you involved with any groups that can support your growth?
I think I had told Marilyn that I was going to go to a Search for God group. That has not worked out as of yet. I'm just starting to go to a Course in Miracles group that I'm hoping will yield some friends, and I'm really pretty much alone. So,
well,
I mean, you told me this a year ago to find some groups, and I just have not had any success, which makes me think I'm not able to hear my guides because I have been searching for a year. And
well, there is a Search for God group on Tuesday nights in Federal Way, and you are always welcome to come to Marilyn's group about the Masters, which is all the same information, just worded in different context. So, it doesn't matter what the group is if you feel comfortable and you feel you're learning and growing from it. But to do it on your own is as you're seeing, it's very difficult, and you do feel isolated and not connected. I would pray that God directs you to a group that would be suitable, that you would like to join, and practical for you to attend. And you will be surprised how, if you are sincere in your request, the answer might come in a very surprising way. Since there's so few of us tonight, I'll tell you the story of how Marilyn found the Search for God group, because she prayed for God to help direct her to a group that did meditation that would be more suitable for her than the one that had changed. And she was at a Course in Miracles class and met a lady named Larita. And she liked Larita, thought Larita was a very lovely lady, and she liked what Larita had to say, and the class seemed to be very suitable and practical. They had some exercises they practiced during their class, and Marilyn got to know some other people, and she had read the Course in Miracles for 8 years before she went to the actual class. She was so frightened to actually be with people in those days. It took her a while, longer than you, for sure. But she finally got to the class and was glad to have company and companionship. In her prayer, she asked for guidance. And the answer came that she was to call up Larita and take her out to coffee. Now, Marilyn had no idea why she would take Loretta to coffee, because they met every Sunday at the group, and everything, they just knew each other barely, just as acquaintances. So she bit the bullet, as you people say, and phoned Loretta, and she said, would you go for coffee? And so they met for coffee in a little coffee shop. And they were sitting there just chatting away, and Loretta was just rambling a mile a minute, and all of a sudden she said the letters A-R-E, and Marilyn says, well, what does that stand for? And so then Loretta began to explain about the Edgar Casey groups, and Marilyn said, oh, that's why I was to bring you to coffee, because I'd never heard of that. So you never know how the answer will come, Vivian. And you might not know who you're going to be taking to coffee, so to speak, to get your answers. But it was by that situation is how she found Search for God people to then join and be a part of. Loretta invited her to the meetings held at her house, and the rest is history, you might say. So it can happen if you truly request it. And pay attention.
When I ask God something, I feel like I ask. So does that mean when you pray you keep asking every day for the same thing? Because it seems like God already heard you. So why do you keep asking again and again?
Well, that is a very good question. If we were all perfect people, we would only ask once, because it would come from the intention of our heart and sincerity. However, being human beings, we tend to ramble off the top of heads, and that does not get through. So sometimes saying it more than once with more intention the next time is going to make the difference. So just to ask is not always just the answer going to come. Is it coming from integrity and sincerity, and do you mean it with your heart? So if you ask it from that deep space of reality, yes, you will get an answer. And then let the universe determine how it's going to come together. And then you just be aware, as she was, oh, I'm supposed to call Loretta for coffee. Why in the world would I want to take Loretta to coffee? I don't know her hardly. And she did it anyway. So follow your hunches, follow your intuition, and you will be very surprised. Does that help?
I think so. I am new at praying, sort of, and so I really will quiet down more and pray more with more intention.
That is wise advice. You see, it takes a while for a new person to go through the layers that are on top of the reality to finally being heard. And this is another example. When Marilyn went to AA, and they said, well, you can ask God to let go of your alcoholism. And she asked and asked and asked for a year and a half. But it was a very superficial asking, she found out, because she wasn't capable of being that sincere. She was always in such a protective state that it was more of a superficial place that she was coming from, until it became so drastic in Hawaii that she realized when she got back to the condo that she had not picked up the wine in the grocery store because of the disasters going on in her life, and made it back to the condo safe. She got on her knees and she prayed from the depths of her heart for the obsession to be removed, and it was. So you have to have that intention, as you were mentioning. So it takes time sometimes to get to that level. Do not be discouraged, but stay persistent. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Well, I'm so glad that you had some questions. If there are any other questions, we'd be glad to answer them now.
I have, maybe it's more of a comment than a question, John, for the benefit of Nancy and Vivian. We do hold a class here on Thursday nights, and we do practice meditation at the end of the class. And we assign an experiment to be worked on throughout the week. And this week's experiment was to become aware of the way that Spirit, I think they used the word tapping or knocking, to get our attention. And you mentioned one, meditation, which is extremely effective way to become aware of Spirit working in your life and bringing you back towards the pathway to God, waking up the I am within. But there are other ways, and I used one today when I was filling out my ballot, and I didn't know which of the candidates to vote for, and so I just tested them in my heart. And one of them rang true, and one didn't. And I felt that Spirit guiding me in my choice, in making the right choice. And there are other ways that you might want to mention in which they can become aware of how Spirit is helping them to wake up that spark of God that's within each one of us.
Thank you, Mac. That was very, very helpful information. There are many ways that Spirit gets your attention, and it is just being aware. As you become more conscious through meditation and prayer and spiritual reading and participating, it becomes more automatic that you get it. Sometimes the message will come through, and then it'll come through again, and then by the third time you might say, oh, I think this is a message. It's gotten to the point that on the second time Marilyn catches on now. She doesn't have to wait for the third. But these little indications that your gut might get unsettled. You might all of a sudden feel uncomfortable. The ways that your feelings are your guideposts, and this is one of the things I was going to talk about today in a different way. But I will share this experience because it's so helpful and it's so simple as far as knowing what to do from guidance. Mac has heard this story, I'm sure, so please be patient. But one day Marilyn was to go golfing with some friends, and her husband was throwing a huge temper tantrum, and she was sick and tired of the temper tantrums, and she was just about ready to throw the towel in and say, oh, just go by yourself and leave me alone. Only she decided, because now she is working a spiritual path, that she better maybe check it out before she blows her stack, and just said, forget it, you're out of here, and leave me alone kind of a comment. So she went in and laid on the bed, and she said, okay, God, I've got a clean slate. How does it feel to go ahead and go golfing? And he's acting out like this. And she expected to be told to stay home, like she thought she was going to do. She was going to get away from it. However, the surprise was her feelings were very calm, peaceful, and pleasant. And she thought, this is really strange. So she said, okay, let's wipe the slate clean, and how does it feel if I do stay home and don't have to be around him? And the anxiety came up inside of her, but was definitely a no-no. And she thought, you gotta be kidding, God. This is ridiculous. Why would I want to go around and be around this angry person all day? That's the the low end of the stick of life, and she didn't want to really have to do that day. So she says, let's try it one more time. So she said, oh, we're going to clean the slate off again, and we'll go through this again. So how does it feel if I go golfing? And again, the peace came back, and it was so pleasant. And she says, okay, what happens if I stay home? And the anxiety returned, and her body was very agitated and full of anxiety. She says, I get it, I'm supposed to go golfing. So she did. And about the third hole, she felt marvelous because God told her, you did not play into his little antics where he acted like a 3-year-old. You did what you truly wanted to do, and now you're enjoying yourself, having a good time. So it was like you never know what the answers are going to be. And to trust that this pleasant feeling was the answer, and the anxiety was the opposite of what to do, is a very simple way of finding out sometimes what is right for you. So you can go within and ask. That's just another little method of quickly saying, how do you feel about it? And start using your feelings as your guide. That's what they're about. In fact, that leads us right into some of the things I wanted to talk about tonight. However, this is kind of in the middle of where I would have been. But if you know that we all came here to practice energy, to learn how to change and shift energy. And third dimension is duality, right and wrong, good and bad, judgment and criticism. And in that very darkest of days, thousands and thousands of years ago, people did not have any knowledge, tools, or understanding that we were here to shift energy. And as the density of the beings, of the human beings, became denser and denser, it was impossible to have feelings. It was more like they were just existing and surviving in fear, and they were just without feelings. They didn't have the reality we can possess today. So by the time the New Testament came along, God said it was time for people to be able to have those feelings start to come alive. And that's what Jesus came to share, is that love, the energy of love is within, and those energies we can attune to and become reality within us, so that we have emotions, we have reality of knowing the anxiety, of knowing the love, of knowing the fear, and not having to buy into it. So one of the lessons that she wanted to talk, Marilyn was thinking would be a good thing to talk about tonight when we were talking about this, is that so many people have guilt in their lives and they don't really recognize it or deal with it or acknowledge it. And guilt is a way of people manipulating you, or you are putting it on yourself, and it feels very uncomfortable. And so therefore, when you're in those states, you're not really able to feel those feelings of the love and the peace and the serenity, which are much higher emotions. And in cleaning away the darkest emotional depths of fear and shame and resentment and anger and rage, all those deep emotions, you can release them and give them to God and replace them with His love and grace. As you know today, that guilt is a useless emotion. In fact, all negative emotions that are negative are useless, except, as Marilyn used it, as a, you might say, barometer of how to get back into peace and calm and love. So if you realize when you're in those emotions that are uncomfortable, this is what Jesus came to teach. How you shift the energy, and how in shifting the energy you send love to the situation. You obliterate the darkness with the love and light of God, and you rise out of it. She had a marvelous day that day. She played golf. So we do not have to stay in those old emotions that stop us from actually hearing and feeling and being more who we truly are as children of love and light, and that we are truly here to enjoy our lives. And we can enjoy our lives when we're having access to those emotions that are bring us serenity and tranquility and enjoyment and pleasure. And it'll be much easier to feel your emotions that aren't positive when you're in the positive state. And then you say, oops, I have gotten off course. And it might be a little fear, it might be a little anxiety, it might be a little guilt because you didn't live up to something you thought you should have accomplished, and now you're beating yourself up. So you can feel those hunches and those feelings much easier the more you have light in your life. They become more obvious when it isn't a positive emotion going on, and you can say, oh, I got off course and I need to move back closer to God again. And then you go back into your serenity. So you see, when Jesus came to bring us the message of love, and that is the high vibration. And anything lower can be dispelled. And when we are in that state of love, anything that disrupts it is just telling us we're off course. And that's our intuition. That's our hunches and our answers that come in various ways. And the answers will come to you in the message or way that you choose. Do you realize you can direct how your answers come to you? Some people had all kinds of wonderful symbology for dreams, and Andrew Casey was very big on dreams. And sometimes they have classes on dreams and books on dreams and people explaining dreams. And she even has an encyclopedia of symbols for dreams. Marilyn got very hung up on all these symbols and said, I'll boulder dash. God, just if I have a dream, just tell me what it's about. So she doesn't worry about too much about the symbols anymore. She just asks for it to be plainly understood and plainly explained. And so sometimes there's symbology. In her latest dreams this last couple of days, there was some symbology, but generally they're pretty plain and straightforward. You don't have to go through all the mysteries of what this dream stands for. It can be very easily and simply presented to you so that you can have that answer in a simple form of what it represents for your changing and growing that the subconscious is trying to tell you about. So that's one way to get answers, is just say like she did when she asked for the dream to appear, the answer to appear in the big billboard. You know, put it in neon lights, and exactly that's what happened. But she had been in New York with that big billboard in front of her. When she saw it, she knew exactly. It was answering the way she asked for it to appear. So you can be specific, or you can just wait for the indications and follow your hunches. There's a variety of ways to do that. So the thing to understand is that if you're uncomfortable, there's a reason, and it's probably telling you something is amiss. However, may I warn you about anxiety? Some people, as they're growing spiritually, move out of their comfort zone because that's what life is about, is to expand. And in that new areas, anxiety will come in because it's not the automatic way of what you're used to feeling. So you will go through growing stages where you can say to yourself, oh, I must be growing because this anxiety, I'm doing the right thing, but it feels different, it feels uncomfortable. And so often, sadly, hospitals or doctors will medicate that anxiety, and what it does, it stops your spiritual growth. You cannot expand your comfort zone if you are on drugs or alcohol or other gambling, other mind and mood altering behaviors, anorexia, some of those other things are all compulsive behaviors, will stop the growth process. So when you go into anxiety and you know that you're doing the right thing because you're changing to do what you have been so carefully trying to improve in your life, just say, oh, I'm growing, and accept the growth. For a few days it might be uncomfortable, but it just will leave as you grow into naturally saying, this is wonderful, now I can do this that I couldn't do before, and I feel comfortable doing it. And you've expanded your horizons. So emotions are very, very important, and people misunderstand the practicality. It's interesting, Vivian, that you brought this up tonight. It's not quite what I was going to talk about, but I'm altering what I'm saying to try to help you better understand. Is it making it more clear to you? It's not
shifting the energy.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, tonight I'm thinking about problems I'm having with my youngest son, and trying to get him to focus on his schoolwork so that he can get caught up. and I have a lot of my energy invested in fear and anxiety. I'm fearful that he will fail, that he will not do well. And he's always done very well.
So what happened in his life just recently to change that? He's reacting to something.
It's been about 3 years that it's been slowly changing, and then recently he went, because he missed so much school last year, this year he is going to internet school, and so he is taking advantage of the situation to play a lot of computer games and video games, and then because he's having digestive complaints, it makes him very lethargic because he's not digesting food properly. But my anger and my frustration, it's all invested in fear. I see myself. I lash out at him, and I can put him down, and I paint this picture of this hobo on the street corner. I say, how are you going to support yourself if you can't get a job? And you can't get a job, if you can't even do your schoolwork, if all you can do is play video? I paint out this horrible picture, and I've laid it out for him and made a horrible suggestion to him, whereas I'm his mother and I should love him no matter what, but I should see through to the perfect in him and refuse to see anything else. But I'm just having such a hard time with it because he's being so lazy, and I'm very critical inside, and I'm critical because I'm fearful. But I guess the shifting of the energy is what
may I
resonated.
Suggest that first of all, to change him, you need to change yourself.
Right.
And as you are less critical of yourself, as you become more loving to yourself, as you are a little easier and give yourself a break and give yourself some confirmation that you're working very hard at being the best mother you can be, and start loving yourself. See, Vivian, you are the daughter of the King of Kings. That makes you a princess. And I want you to start treating yourself as such. You are very hard on yourself because of your fear, but you don't need to have fear if you have faith. So dispel the fear and replace it with the faith that it's in God's hands. You are going to be successful as a mother if you are a loving mother. And that's why he is having the health problems, is that the toxic energy being foisted out, he doesn't want to digest. It is not comfortable. It's making him sick. So the more you can send love to him, but it has to come from the loving mother. It can't come from a fearful mother. That's against the principles of nature. So I want you to start doing loving things for yourself. If it's take a bubble bath and some candlelight, or if it's give yourself a 5-minute break to just sit down and listen to some pleasant music, or give yourself a little time so that you aren't so rushed and hurried, and you give yourself a little break to go get an ice cream cone. So you need to be coming from a place that you love yourself, and you can extend it to him and let him know that he's protected and cared for. And no matter what happens to him, God is taking care of him. And he's taking care of you, and together you will be a success, because success is on the inside. It's not if you're standing on a corner with whichever clothes you have on, the fanciest high style or the clothes out of the Goodwill. It's what's inside is what's a success. Does he love himself? That's the success story. Anything you can do to help support his self-esteem. And that really has, for him, if you love him, then he'll learn to love himself. And then the success will just fall off a log, because with loving yourself, you will make good decisions. You will follow in the steps that are right for you because they feel comfortable and good. And you will follow that path that is of love and comfort and contentment, because you know that you're taken care of with all things are possible, and that there is nothing out there you can't handle without God. With God you can handle anything that might have in the past been fearful you didn't have the courage for, but with God you have all the courage you need to step forward and be assertive and to trust. So you see, when there is a prayer that you might try every day, and it's, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And what you need to accept is your son is perfect in God's eyes. You're looking at the nitpicky little things that you're projecting onto him. They aren't your son. They're your projections of your denial. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You're projecting your fears onto him, and that's what's making him sick. So those projections, the only thing you can change is yourself. As you change yourself and as you're loving yourself, the love will go to your son. He will feel that love and connection and bonding, and he will change because you have changed.
John, I want to get something more specific.
Yes.
If let's say that he wakes up in the morning at 10, and then he plays video games for 4 hours, say, as a parent, do I love him for what he is and let that be, and I don't even really know how to parent him, because it's so discordant from what my expectations are. Do I release my expectations and just say, God, grant me the wisdom to realize I can't change this?
Well, there is something a parent needs to do that goes along with this, Vivian. That's an excellent question. Along with the love, so that he can grow spiritually, he needs boundaries. He needs perimeters and structure. So there should be, at the end of the day, some kind of a chart that he could fill out of, this is what I accomplished because these were the expectations for the day of what I needed to do to have a successful school day. And if he doesn't make the chart, if he hasn't fulfilled his obligations, the games are not provided or acceptable, or they are taken away so that they aren't available. Some kind of a reward and system where there are things that when they're taken away from him because he didn't meet his obligations as a student, you might ask him and having him make a list of what is the worst things that could happen if you aren't following what you need to be able to graduate at the right time with the right grades, so that that you can move on and continue your schooling.
John?
Yes?
How do I get the video games away from him? If I grab the computer, he will grab it back. I'm a single parent.
Mm-hmm.
My ex-husband does not want to get involved. He wants to be the good guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no help. I don't know how to get those games away from him. I don't know how.
Is there a way that the computer is only available for school projects and otherwise it is disconnected and not available? Or the door is locked?
I actually called the internet service and the school today, and there's nothing.
There's no way you could have some on and off switches?
Not unless I took the whole computer away.
Wow. It's a very difficult problem in today's technology, isn't it?
Well, it would be better if I want to ask God to help me. I really want to ask God to change my son, but I know that's not right. That I need to change, and I need to accept whatever my son is. Yet I know that I need to be some sort of a parent and make some boundaries. And when he was small, of course, if he's abusing a toy, well, I could take the toy away, but I'm just having trouble.
Well, I think you might want to consider why he's not in an actual classroom and say, because there was no responsibility with your following through using the computer, we are going back to the schoolroom. And if you show me with your grades that you are now again a responsible person, we will reconsider using the internet.
No. The internet was we can't go back until the semester, and he already wants to. He misses it.
Oh.
But it was both of our choices, not just his, because I was at my wit's end trying to get him to go to school when he felt so bad in the morning because of stomach problems.
Well, that was emotional problems, yes. He's his own worst enemy, and he has a lot of insecurity. And that's why you need to be as able to send love to him as possible so his security will grow.
Yeah.
Yes, you have a difficult thing, and there's still some months before the semester changes. I wish I had all the answers, Vivian. Has the school done anything to help you with this?
No.
Do you have the option of going to a counselor at the school and telling them the situation, that maybe he could come back before the end of the semester?
I hadn't thought of that, but I don't think so, because he hasn't done any of the work at school.
He would have a lot of catching up to do, but
Yeah.
the point is he's going to have to catch up and do it now or later.
Well, at the semester, then it will be a fresh start.
Well, he will have missed the grades for the semester he hasn't finished, though, won't he?
Well, right now he's behind on his schoolwork, but he could still catch up. He's like 10 math assignments behind, and
All right.
4 German assignments behind.
I would suggest when those assignments are caught up, then the computer games are not an issue or a problem. If the assignments each day that you come home and they aren't caught up, then there's going to be some other consequences besides losing out on the computer games. There needs to be, you see, people learn by their mistakes, and if the consequences are not there, they don't learn how to do it differently. They don't say, oh, I didn't accomplish this and I got by with it, and they never learn how to change their behavior to work for them. So it's very important that there's some kind of consequences that would be to him, you never know what is going to affect a child. You think taking away certain things will be devastating, and they think it's a lark because you didn't get what he really, is meaningful to him. So have him make a list of the most devastating things that could happen as far as consequences, and if one day he hasn't taken care of those lessons, you take away the first consequences, goes into action, and gradually, pretty soon, he's going to be without all of his rewards, so to speak. So
he's actually a very loving, I just can't tell you how loving he is sometimes. He comes up and spontaneously gives me a hug, and he's a wonderful child. I'm thinking right now that if I can send him enough love and become trusted by him again, because we had a bad day, and I think that eventually I can speak with him, because he wants to catch up. He wants to do well. He doesn't want to flunk. He's actually kind of being swept away by his laziness. It's like his just like the same way I have my bad habits, it's his bad habit that he's being swept away with. That that maybe we can commiserate on solutions. Like, Reese, it would be better if you didn't play the games. And he would say yes, and then I would say, how about if I take him away from you and you can have him back? Maybe he would go for that. When he is...
Well, as a parent, you have to draw the line at some point. There is a time where you can negotiate and a time where the parent has the final say.
I just don't know. When he's mad at me, I don't know how to get those games from him.
Well, when he's angry, tell him and validate, you're really angry right now. See, it's his anger, it's not yours. He's not getting his way somehow. He's angry because he's got fear. Anger covers up fear. So you might say, you're really angry right now. What is so scary in your life or fearful in your life that you're getting angry to protect yourself? I want to help you, not make it worse.
I guess I need to control my own fear, because he often reacts to me.
Mm-hmm.
I will say something insulting and then he will react in anger, but I say that out of my own fear.
Exactly.
So if I could be more consistently loving and accepting.
Accept his feelings no matter what they are, because they're his feelings. It's his reaction, And like you say, instead of reacting, send love to the situation. You know, I know you're upset. I know you're angry. Why are you angry? Tell me about it. And get him to calm down and say, well, I'm scared of whatever. You know, children have a lot of fears, and they need to be talked about, and they need to be validated and say, I'm fearful about that too, or I have a fear that's similar. I understand, and come to a ground agreement together where you both have feelings, and it's okay to have your feelings rather than to fight them. I think he's trying to get some independence in some way. How old is he?
16.
Oh, well, this is part of the problem, Vivian. He's trying to be independent and grow up. I thought he was more like 10 or 11. Okay, at 16, he's becoming a man, but not overly, but he's growing into that in his independence. There's an ego part of the testosterone that's growing in him. and you know, you know the characters of the ego of the young man and the hot rod and the cigarette and the car and all that. And he's wanting to find his independence, but you can take the wind out of his sails by saying, I know you're really angry, and can we talk about it, you know, in a little bit, maybe you'll be calmed down. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
John?
Yes.
Marilyn's been in trance for about 50 minutes. Could you check with Martha and see if there's any other entities that wanted to come in this evening and let her kind of decide what to do?
Oh, very good, and thank you for mentioning that. Give me a moment. Well, yes, what I think I'll do is I'm going to let Archangel Ariel come in and maybe give a few words of help and blessings. So I would like to say have a very pleasant evening, and I know that this is a difficult situation and it can work itself out. Love heals all, and just remember that, to love yourself so that others can be loved too. Good evening.
Good evening, John. Thank you for coming.
Hello everybody, I'm Ariel.
Good evening, Ariel.
And I'm just glad to be here tonight. I hear that we're having some problems, but you know, when we bless people, when we send love to them, they do feel it. So in your prayers, people, I would like you to suggest tonight, if you're having difficult situations, to send them love in your prayers. You see, that sending love to others really does change things. A very marvelous thing happened this week to prove that how important this is. You see, as you learn to love yourself more and not be so hard on yourself, and you are loving yourself, the other people feel your difference. You're not having walls around you to protect yourself. Your walls have come down, and the love can then pass out to those around you that you really want the love to go to. And a very marvelous thing happened this week. Marilyn's daughter called her to tell her about this, because Marilyn's daughter was ready to divorce her drinking husband, was drinking, and it was getting to be an unmanageable situation. All the paperwork and things that necessary arrangements had been made. When he finally decided he didn't want a divorce and he was willing to make some changes. And in the changes, she was able to stay, and they refinanced the house back. She put the money back into the equity that she had taken out, and all the paperwork was not used, and they reunited. And she has been going to a 12-step program and learning how to pray for others and to take better care of herself. And this week when he went hunting, he normally, he's still drinking, and he normally could be a very unhappy man, let's put it that way. And he's very hard on himself. And he's very critical and very judgmental of himself, and he compares himself to people that have had more education, and he sees himself as less than. So he puts himself into a very difficult place, and he's not always the most pleasant. And she was so thrilled because he had had a very discouraging situation where he lost the keys to the truck, not lost them, but they were locked inside the cab. He was all packed up, ready to go down the mountain. Hadn't gotten his deer this season, and lo and behold, somebody else showed up where he was getting ready to leave, but he couldn't because he didn't have his keys and he didn't have any way to get them. And this person helped him finagle the lever in the truck to be able to get into the truck and get the keys. And he didn't go ballistic, he didn't get angry, he didn't get impatient, and he saw how this fellow had helped him, and he was gracious about it and grateful and happy that the man showed up and that it worked out so well, and he was just tickled. And he's driving down the mountain, and he hadn't unloaded his gun because he doesn't do that till the end of the bottom of the trail. And on the way down, he spotted a deer. And he was able to get his gun and get his deer. And at the end of the trail, he, of course, unloaded his gun, he had his deer, and he was heading home. And he realized that if he had been earlier, he would have missed the deer. So the keys being in the car, or the truck in this case, had made him later than he had planned. And instead of getting frustrated and upset about it, he saw how it had worked for him, that he was able to get the deer after all because the timing had worked out so to his advantage. And so he's telling his wife how all of this came together, and he has a smile on his face, and he has laughter about how the coincidences came together for him and how well it worked out, and he came home with his deer and he got help with the keys, and how he's doing this in a very pleasant way, and she could hardly wait to tell her friends, and she could hardly wait to tell her mother. And it was marvelous because that wasn't truly against his typical character of his coming home grumpy and not getting a deer and look what happened to me in the car and all that kind of falderall that has gone on before. And this is what happens when you send love to somebody. It took a long time. It took a long period of time for her to do the changes necessary for him to finally feel the love coming to him, that he could finally relax and enjoy what was going on in his life and see it for a better way than what he might have in the past. So you see, it's possible for people to change because we change. And that's what I want you to remember, is the more you pray for others and send that love out, the more your life will change around you. And she was so tickled that she says, "Oh, Mom," she says, "he was telling me with a smile on his face, and he was chuckling about it," and she was just thrilled because that's not how it would have happened in the past. So you see, Vivian, becoming what you want the other person to be really can work. And in this case, it was a true life story. And I hope that we can all remember to send love to all our loved ones all the time, even if they're the most difficult ones. They need it the most.
So you just feel love in your heart and ask God to send love to them?
Right. And you can ask for their health, their happiness, their prosperity, their whatever you want, you send to them. I'll tell you the secret behind it, Vivian. When you send it to them, what goes around comes around. So you are actually going to get it back for yourself. But in the process, they benefit too. They will become what you want for yourself, and your environment will then be what you have sent out in your prayers. You see, you can change your environment by what you pray for. So if you want a happy family, you send out happiness to all your family. If you want, in Marilyn's case, she is still sending love to her son. He is not talking to her, hasn't for some time. Very, very angry man, 40-some years old, and is still a very angry man. But she called him today or yesterday and just said, "I just wanted to say," he didn't answer the phone. She didn't expect him to. She just said, "I just wanted to call and see how you're doing, and I love you." If he'd answered the phone, it would have probably been a disturbing call for her, and he didn't answer, but she left the message anyway. So you see, sometimes it's not easy to send love to some people, but you can find little ways of doing little special things that they might enjoy or like that would be special to them, and so they get the message. You don't have to just pray, but sometimes just sending a nice card. There was a Hallmark commercial a while back, and it was a young girl, and she was in her room upset about something, and the mother pushed a Hallmark card under the door in the commercial, of course. And the girl read the card and opened the door and gave her mother a great big hug. You see, everybody wants to be loved. And that's what I'm about, is sending blessings to everybody. We all want to be loved. And when we feel safe enough to let the love in, then that's when we're all happy campers. And that's when we all become merged and bonded and have our joyful experiences. And we have healed that relationship with love. So whatever it takes to create loving expression, even in the hardest of times, say, I know you're having a difficult time right now. What can we do about it? I know life is not going easy for you right now. How can I be helpful? How can I assist you? Or what can I do to make it easier for you? Any way we can help somebody having a difficult time, you're really helping yourself. That's changing your karma, and it's so beneficial to the other person in addition. I hope this has been a little helpful message. I need to go, and I wish you all well in sending your loving messages out for their health, happiness, and whatever you want for yourself. So I would like to say good evening and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, Ariel.
Oh, I'm just so glad we're here today. And I just think that sometimes it's difficult with kids. I don't think I have any children to worry about that you would know about because it's been so long ago.